Don't be a douche. The end. The abridged version of our TED Talk. But if you want a Mr. Longer version, compromising compassion for the sake of scientific or evolutionary progress is simply unethical and not considered progress at all, if we are forgetting the human rights and values in such a process, as in the case of Henrietta Lacks.
Henrietta Lacks was an often infirm African-American woman with cervical cancer. She went to Johns Hopkins Hospital for treatment, where they took a sample of her cancer and used it for research without her consent.
When this one guy, named George Guy, found out her cells literally didn't die, he began giving them away to anyone who asked for them, like giving free candy to children in parks out of white vans. And when I say they didn't die, I mean, like, those things are literally living by themselves.
Like, those cells, man! Those cells, they did not have to do what they did, but they did what they did, and they did it harder than they needed to have did, but they did that so hard. They did that. Like, these cells went off. Like, they out here. Like, these cells, man, they went off like, boom. Everywhere. Like, they big. HELA. Henrietta Lacks. They big. Yeah.
And now, live from our live HELA cell live stream, a live HELA cell living its best life, going off for a long time. Because, you know, it's immortal. Live.
Persona 4 Dancing All Night.
Here's another one.
For science, said the doctor, justifying his use of her cells without consent, and the people who received her cells started capitalizing on them. Her cells contributed to the discovery of the vaccine for polio, as well as unlimited testing and research opportunities for scientists around the world. But when the doctor took out a piece of Henrietta's cancer, he didn't know that she would save lives with her cancer or change the world, when that's exactly what happened. Any credit attributed to her was misinformed or misunderstood, and no monetary compensation was given to her family until 2000, by a whole nother person. No one even thought it was necessary or the right thing to do, even as her family suffered several health problems and were not able to pay their medical bills. Her cells were making tons of money out in the world. This is where a lot of gray areas in morality are encountered. Should the scientific community have given credit for her contribution? Should monetary compensation have been given to her family? If every other doctor was doing it, was it okay for that doctor to refrain from telling her that her cancer was going to be used for research? Is it okay in general for all doctors to withhold information from their patients if a patient's potential answer would hinder the progression of science and therefore human evolution? Bored doctor finds her awesome cells. Wow. But then if he asked her, what if she said no? Then it would mean no evolution, no fish man. So he didn't ask her. Is that ethical? Is that right? It's a difficult question. Should it be prevented in the future?
A brief intermission into the basics of bioethics so we can figure those questions out. According to Bioethics and Vulnerability, Recasting the Objects of Ethical Concern by Michael Thompson, the dominance of philosophy and the early alliance with, or institutionalization within, medicine have impacted the practices and styles of thought of bioethics, and has created selectivity towards a formalistic, procedural, disembodied, or universalistic way of identifying and resolving bioethical dilemmas. Basically, to define the ethics present in science, it is necessary to look to basic human values and morals. Bioethics relies on the main claim of principlism, which was devised by Tom Beauchamp and James Childress, that common principles transcend cultural, theological, and personal differences, and that autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice are the four tools to deliberate on ethical issues in healthcare. Do the professionals around Henrietta practice these four principles? They definitely acted autonomously, had no malicious intentions, and were helping treat her cancer with beneficence. But the moral ambiguity persists with the principle of justice, both in the instance of her treatment and what the doctors chose to do, or rather what not to do for her family after her death. So what is the answer to this question? Rebecca Dresser has something for that. In her article, Experimentation Without Representation, she states that it is wishful thinking to suppose that most of the people on whom research is conducted today are co-equal participants with the research team and sponsors, and that relying exclusively on experts for ethical and regulatory decision-making risks treating subjects as research material rather than as moral agents with the right to judge the thick of investigative procedures in which they are asked to participate. Though definitely not for all cases, the tendency to disregard the value and humanity of research subjects, whether intentional or not, is present in science and medicine. Even if subjects do not possess as much expertise in a certain area than a researcher does, they still have the right to be respected as a human being with value, to be informed by the researcher on what will happen, and to have the freedom to give consent or make personal decisions with that information. To violate any one of these would not only devalue the subject as a person, but would also imply that the researcher has a preconceived prejudice against subjects he or she fails to treat as equal. It is an obvious instance of an absence of compassion, whether it be subconscious or not, and in the case of Henrietta Lacks, this absence of compassion was accompanied with a dismissal of her and her family's opinion because of their skin color, level of education, and social status. At this point, the injustices experienced by Henrietta and the Lacks family go past a doctor's absence of compassion, or dismissal of patient opinion. The systematic marginalization that kept them in poverty and poor health, and provided only a paltry amount of education or information for them, as American science, technology, and society flourished all around them, is the real injustice. At the extreme, a complete absence of compassion in our society would lead to the rise of dystopian worlds or tyrannical regimes, but the strange balance our society holds also keeps us from becoming an village. Human values and kindness are definitely capable of existing alongside scientific and evolutionary progress, as can be seen by individuals like Christoph Lengauer and Rebecca Skloot, who gave back to Henrietta's family by bringing awareness to them and to others, and representing them accurately for the world to see, even as Henrietta's cells help the world of science. This window into one of the cracks of the American healthcare system shows us that real progress happens when doctor and patient, researcher and subject, technology and humanity advance side by side, and not when the latter is compromised. What happened to Henrietta Lacks and what followed for her family was not ethical, and unfortunately what happened to them has happened to countless others. What has been done, and there is no reversing that. But compensation for wrongs that have occurred, and the prevention of those future mistakes are crucial to taking the steps toward real progress, not just as individuals, but for humanity as a whole.